Bring the heart.
It's time to get loud.
Let's go! Because this is Betfred Super League.
Bring it on.
Got me here. It took a big chunk out of me. Bleeding. It's bleeding. Oh no, it's bleeding. The thing just ripped my ear off. What do you think?
Welcome to a special edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast this week, again sponsored by Betfred. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk to another leading personality of the game. Warrington legend Paul Cullen is these days chairman of the Rugby League Match Review Panel, and as the crackdown on foul play continues in 2022, his views on the disciplinary process is well worth listening to. Paul is, of course, a former Warrington star player and coach himself. And on occasions like this, it's always good to rewind to the time he first began in the game, way back, in his case, in 1980, when he achieved every young player's dream as he signed for his hometown club.
Eddie, it absolutely was. You know, I played for Crossfields for only one season. I started when I was 16 and I'd left when I was 17. And I was a massive Warrington fan. You know, it's before there was anything like, you know, the dad and lad days. It's where we went. You know, I've got three sisters, and my mum and the girls used to have their Sunday, which was very family orientated. And me and my dad went to watch Warrington. We travelled the length and breadth of the country as fanatical Warrington fans. And I came to rugby league quite late by modern day standards. I was into my last year at senior school. I was very fortunate that a teacher came across, actually from St Helens, Neil Kilshaw, and introduced rugby league to Boteler Grammar School in Warrington. And it was very much a rugby union, football and athletics school, and they'd never played rugby league at all. And I was very fortunate that Neil brought in and started a rugby league side in my last year. And I always was into, you know, personal fitness. And he made me stand off and captain. And it just stuck and it worked. I loved the game anyway, and I just found a natural connection to the to the brutality of rugby league. It just fit. It's a part of my DNA. It worked. I was reasonable at football, and then just stopped playing football altogether the moment we started playing rugby league. And in that year, I then joined Crossfields. And within 12 months, I'd signed for Warrington.
You must have caught somebody's eye. There's no doubt about that. And the one thing that people maybe forget about you, because latterly we know you as a second row forward, playing in the pack. You did start, as you just said, as a standoff. And you won the Lancashire Cup for Warrington from standoff against St Helens at Bolton. That must have been one of the highlights, even so it was so early on.
Well, if we consider Warrington's recent record against the Helens, I'd actually forgotten it was against the Saints, Eddie, to be honest. But it was a really... I remember playing standoff to Ken Kelly at scrum half, and Ken Kelly was a man of steel. He was a Great Britain international. He was absolutely world class, and I learned bundles for him on a daily basis. Not only about rugby league, but about life in general. He really did knock some edges off you. He put you right. And to this very day, I remember training sessions with Ken Kelly and Dave Chisnall and John Bevan and Steve Hesford. And goodness me, was that a tough dressing room to get in. And I'm in there at 17 years of age.
Wow.
But... I understand it can't happen these days, but in that 1 year, 16 to 17, I played for 4 teams at Crossfields. There was 2 open age teams, the first and the seconds. There was an under 18s and under 16s, and across any given weekend, I'd played for all 4. We play sometimes 2 or 3 games per weekend. We turn up on a Saturday, and the coach would get first dibs on who he wanted for whatever games. And if you didn't get picked, you simply went and played for another team. It was it's quite remarkable when you think back to it. And the amateur game, which is now the community game, was almost at a peak. You know, I've played for Crossfields against Latchford Albion at Victoria Park at 16 years of age, and there's a couple of thousand people stood around. You know, there's not a rope or a fence in sight. They're all stood round the four sides of the pitch, and the atmosphere was febrile, absolutely insane at times. And it was, occasionally a game of rugby would break out amidst the punching and kicking and fighting and the brawling. It was absolutely brutal. So I'd play for the under-16s on a Sunday, or the under-18s, depending which one needed a player. And then on a Saturday, you'd play for either the second team or the first team. And you're at 16, you're playing with guys or men who are mid to late 20s, early 30s, and it was such a culture shock.
I bet it was. What a learning curve. And in the end, you moved into the pack. Something must have worked for you, because I think you played something like 350 games for the Warrington Wolves, didn't you?
I did. I started as a standoff, and that year, when I was 17, Warrington played 35 games, and I got in because the scrum half, I think it was Ken Gwillam at the time, was injured. So Ken Kelly moved from standoff to scrum half, and I played at standoff. And Warrington played 35 games in that season, and I played all 35 at 17 years of age. And then you couldn't go backwards. Was I ready for it? Probably not, but then you can't go back to playing. And I don't think there was an under 17s, 18s at the time. It was simply men's rugby. It was open
it was
age.
First team again, or reserve team. Full stop.
That was it.
But you kept your place for 35 matches at 17 years of age.
Yes,
Remarkable.
It's something that stays with me. I didn't, it was Proctor's that Ian Proctor, our good friend, that eventually gave me that stat. I hadn't realised it. It was just normalised at the time. Yeah. And once you were in, and once you were playing a first team on a Sunday, I'm telling you now, there's no way on earth you were going to go back and play reserve grade Friday night football, because in terms of brutality, that's just about 10 steps slower. So when they got you, they got you. At least on a Sunday, people are trying to win the game, and there's some skill, and you're playing with the likes of John Bevan, British Lion rugby union for Wales and rugby league for Wales, and a British Lion at both codes. You were playing. It's like playing in the Liverpool side with Kenny Dalglish or Stevie Gerrard from a Warrington perspective. It was literally mind blowing. And to this very day, I'm now 58, and I can remember it as if it was yesterday. It was that profound.
I bet you can. I'm going to embarrass you now, because I've got some quotes here from ex-players, Bob Jackson and Dwayne Mann. Jacko said, "You put your heart into everything you did." And Dwayne Mann said, "He was one of the toughest, loyal and ultimate teammates ever. Most of all, a champion, always on and off the field." That's lovely, isn't it?
It blows me away. It chokes me up, to be honest. But I remember playing with those guys, and I would repeat that about them. Were we at Warrington at that point the best team in rugby league as it was then, the old First Division? No, we weren't. We'd probably start a few fights and win a few, but you couldn't beat Wigan. They were practically unbeatable during that kind of 10-year period. The evil genius of Maurice Lindsay. He assembled a team at Wigan that were practically untouchable, and certainly in the big games.
The first full-time team, weren't they? The first full-time professional team.
Yeah, they were 10 years ahead of everyone else. Not in only the fact that they were full-time, but the fact that Maurice's genius was, not only did he build from the ashes of a Wigan team that were relegated, they then took and bought the best player from each club, not only strengthening Wigan, but really weakening
everybody else.
Yeah, if you've got to take Ellery Hanley out of Bradford, they're not the same Bradford. If you've got to take Joe Lydon out of Widnes, Andy Gregory out of Warrington, Andy Goodway out of Oldham, Henderson Gill, etc., your opposition start to dwindle. It was a piece of brilliance from Maurice Lindsay, and it took the rest of us, if we ever have done, I think it's only the advent of the salary cap that actually allowed teams to catch Wigan back up. They were that far in front.
They were. All good things have to come to an end. 1986, the boots went on the golden nail, and you packed up as a player, and the coaching bug started to get to you. You started, I think I'm right in saying, as the under-21s that was now in place, under-21s coach at Warrington. Then you went to Whitehaven in 2000. I mean, Warrington to Whitehaven, the only similarity is the W that starts the names. But I mean, that was the learning curve for you as a coach.
It was vital, and again, very profound. I went to Whitehaven because it was the furthest club I could find away from Warrington, and I say that with all due respect. I needed a change. I think I needed a change from Warrington Rugby League Club, and Warrington Rugby League Club needed a change from me. Not everything's smooth and transitional as we'd like it to be, and you do cross swords and you do have your own views and thoughts, and I didn't think the club was going in the direction that it should go. And I left on the back of it. It was a conscious decision for me at that point to leave Warrington, because I thought it was going in absolutely the wrong direction on and off the field.
But it didn't take long, because 2 years after that you get the call from Warrington to come back. You take over from David Plange. The club was in the middle of a relegation fight, and the people in the town of Warrington will always remember you fondly because you saved Warrington. I'm not going to say extinction, but you saved Warrington from relegation that year.
Well, I honestly don't think Warrington could have or would have survived if it had been relegated. It's one of the proudest elements of Warrington Rugby League Football Club. It's never ever been out of whatever the top flight is, whether it's the old League One or it's now the modern day Super League. It's never ever dropped into any other division. I think we are one of the very, very few clubs in their entire history that has that honour. And you're right, Eddie, of the 12, at that point, 6 games to go, Warrington were 12th. And arguably, and this is not just my opinion, it's probably arguably the weakest Warrington squad or team that's ever been assembled. Why? Because the 12th out of 12th. That's not my personal opinion. And the club was plummeting downwards and backwards at a rate of knots that was unhealthy for everyone, let alone the people who are paying their good hard-earned money to watch a Warrington side disintegrate in front of them. And if you are buying players from the second and third divisions as they were then at that point, then there's probably only one outcome, because the other clubs aren't going to stand still while you rebuild and you rework your finances. But the coaching aspect came in almost by default. I remember, and I've just had a full knee replacement at 58. I smashed my knee when I was 24. So for the last 10 years of my career, from 24 to 34, I had an operation at the end of every year to clean out the knee. And the game takes its toll. And I remember going in to see Alex Murphy, who was the director of rugby at Warrington at that time, and it's around the time of the old before Sky rescued rugby league and actually provided the funds for us to become full-time professionals. Alex Murphy was director of rugby and John Doherty was head coach. I was the club captain, and the knee finally went. I came back from the surgeon. And the surgeon said, "It's done, it's over, you can no longer ever play on that knee, it's that bad." And I came back and told Alex Murphy, and Alex's answer was, "Well, we just sacked the assistant coach, you're now the assistant coach." That literally was the answer.
That was it. It wasn't calling. It wasn't like, I must be a coach, I've got to be a coach when this finishes.
No, I had a really good relationship with Brian Johnson. I worked for the club then. My full-time job, I was working for the club as a commercial manager. And so I had a really strong relationship with Brian Johnson. Not only were we ex-teammates, but we were in the next office to each other at Wilderspool. So I spent most of my working day in Brian's office watching videos with him, and I really began to understand the view of the game, the aspects of the game from a coaching perspective. Previously, I'm that type of player. I've only got one gear, and it's fifth. And I've really noticed that the world-class players like Jonathan Davis, I don't think there's a player to this day that's anywhere near as good as Jonathan Davis. He was absolutely brilliant, world class. John could play in 5 or 6 gears. He could go from number 1 to number 6 and from number 6 to number 1. He had timing, he had spatial awareness, he understood tempo in a game. I didn't. It was everything I did was 100 miles an hour. So you're getting a different view on the game because you're not in player mode. And from that, I've come back and I've told Alex the news before I've even told my family. I've literally come back from the surgeon. He went, "Right, well, start tonight. You're at Victoria Park with the reserves."
And off you went.
Off I went, and I spent my first year on crutches, just having my last operation on my knee at that point. around Victoria Park on crutches running the 21s.
You wonder why people play the game when you hear stories about this. Coaching on crutches. 10, now 11
This is the 12th. Yes.
Good God.
You know, so it takes its damage. And if you're not prepared to go through that, you literally won't last the course. You know, the occasional player might go through unscathed, but it is the occasional player. The vast majority of us leave the game in a far worse state than we entered into it. It does its damage.
You left some great memories though behind you. I mean, great achievement to keep Warrington in the old Super League. I would imagine though your greatest memory, your greatest achievement was the day that you decided to sign one Andrew Johns on the short-term contract. Now we're both smiling because that night at the Halliwell Jones Stadium, where he made his debut against Leeds, one of the greatest nights in Warrington's and Super League history. Full house, and Andrew Johns that night was a magician.
He was untouchable. You know, the story I'm going to tell now, Eddie. I think if people think I've made it up when I tell the truth about the Andrew Johns situation. We'd built the team steadily over about 3 or 4 years from what was the worst position the club's ever been in, 12th out of 12 with 2 games to go. And we won. We beat Salford and stayed up that year. And I rebuilt the side from 2003 onwards. 10, 11, 12 players left every year as we rebuilt the side. And I think by 2005, if I'm not mistaken, the year of the Andrew Johns signing, we are actually, from 12th, we are now a part of the top 4. We're 4th. But we're hanging in there by the skin of our teeth. Me two half-backs, Lee Breers and Nathan Wood, were literally playing game by game. Lee Breers had a long-standing back and hamstring problem. Nathan Wood had broke his toe and his foot that many times. It had practically fused. And we've got about 5 or 6 games to go. And I know full well that Lee Breers and Nathan Wood, if they get injured, I'd used all my plan Bs and plan Cs. There was nothing else. All the guys that were on the bench or in the reserve squad were also injured or unavailable for whatever reason. And I mentioned to Simon Moran, we met practically 3 or 4 times a week, an absolute gentleman. Saved the club. I didn't save the club. Simon Moran saved the club. I was just a part of the infrastructure that enabled it. That I'd literally said, we're in the top 4. I can't guarantee and I can't promise that we're going to hang on to the top 4 by the time the playoffs come around. I said, Simon, I need some support. I need some backup to Lee Breers and Nathan Wood. There's a couple of guys knocking round. They're in the Championship. No clubs are going to let their halfbacks go at this point of the year. I've got a couple of ideas of players I'd like to bring in on a short-term basis. And Simon's answer was, and I remember we're meeting at the hotel near his office in Manchester, and he went, well, I'm meeting Andrew Johns' agent at the cricket. He also works for Sony Music, and Simon's a music promoter. And he said, I'll ask him, does he want to come?
Not the promoter, Andrew Johns.
Andrew Johns. And I literally looked at Simon, and my face was like stone. I kind of looked at him and went, Simon, I need someone this week. I don't know whether Lee Breers is going to play on Sunday. I don't know whether Nathan Wood, if he plays, can get through the game. Thank you for mentioning Andrew Johns. It's like trying to sign Pele or trying to sign Bobby Moore. It just doesn't happen. And I went, right, okay, thank you for that. However, can I have a look at, have we got any money? Can you find any money where I can bring someone in? Is there a transfer fee available? What can we do? And he went, right, just leave it with me. I'll get back to you. Well, we shook hands as we always did, and I walked away, and he rang me 24 hours later, and he said, Paul, it's on. I went, what is? And he went, no, Andrew Johns. I've spoken to John Fordham. I met him at the cricket, and he said, leave it with him. He'll sort it out, and Andrew would love to come. He's fully aware of the history of Warrington Rugby League Club because he's an aficionado of the game. This is arguably the greatest player that's ever been. And he said he's always wanted to play in England, and he'll try his best to get out of whatever contractual obligations he's got, and he'll be on the first plane. Eddie, I nearly fell over. And I've got, what, you mean the Andrew Johns? Actually, Andrew Johns from Newcastle. We are talking about the right one. He went, yeah, of course it is. Eddie, he turned up, he got on the plane, and he landed on Thursday. Wow. That's how it happened.
And he played on the Friday.
And he played on the Friday against Leeds. And even though Warrington have never won the grand final, we go down Warrington go down in the history of the modern era for bringing a game of that quality and that standard to the sporting public. So, if there's 15,000 that night in the Halliwell Jones, there wasn't 15,000 Warrington fans in there because it attracted people from far and wide.
Absolutely.
It delivered to the broadcaster. It delivered some hope. That message of Andrew Johns gave the Warrington fans hope. The hope's still there, but we didn't have Adrian Morley. We'd never have got Adrian Morley if we hadn't got Andrew Johns, because it just put us... I know I was negotiating with agents and players didn't want to come. So for all the criticism of the teams that were at Warrington between 2002, 3, 4 and 5, we're in pitching for players who aren't coming to the Warrington Club. They're going to Wigan, they're going to St Helens, they're going to Leeds and Bradford at the time, the actual big four as they were. We are fighting over scraps, and I say that respectfully. We're playing almost money and a half to players because they're not going to win trophies at Warrington that time. Andrew Johns changed the absolute face and scope and the potential of Warrington Rugby League Club. And at that point, Simon Moran is a director of the club. He didn't own the club as I think as he currently does, or as he did. He then bought out all the other directors, and it gave Simon hope and ambition. And he worked his way through the system from saving the club in the years when we went from part-time to professional when Rupert Murdoch invested into the game. The whole board changed, and that Simon Moran was a part of that board of directors that saved the club at that time.
Amazing memories, absolutely amazing.
And we did that game plan on the phone.
All done on the hoof.
Literally on a mobile phone. I'm ringing Andrew Johns, who lived in Manly at the time in Sydney, and we are doing the game plan on the phone. Now, people learn in different ways. You're visual, you can kinesthetic, you feel it. Some people have got to see it, they've got to write it down. Some people just go, right, I've got it. So I've told him what our shape and our structures are, and his answer was, I've got it. I went, I'll send you over the playbook, and he said, no, I don't need it. I said, I'll tell you how we get from A to B. This is our structure. He went, right, I understand it. I've watched a few of your games. I've got it.
Wow. And
I went, really? And I didn't know the depth of his quality at that time. He went, no, I've got it, mate. I went, I'll get you from A to B. And when you get to B, that's our structure. He went, right, I'll take it from there.
And boy, he produced in spades that night. It was a fantastic night, one of the greatest nights I think that this town, rugby league-wise, has ever seen. OK, so you get Andrew Johns, 2008, things started to go wrong. You left the club. That must have been one hell of a wrench. A year later, you're up the road at Widnes, which must have been a culture shock completely because they're your biggest local rivals. Then you became director of rugby at Widnes, and then all of a sudden, end of Paul Cullen involvement in the game. What have you been doing since? Because now, you go down as one of the roughest, toughest players that has ever played the game. Now, would it insult you if I said you're a poacher turned gamekeeper?
It nails it, Eddie. It's absolutely bang on. The RFL at some point were being criticised that the disciplinary process was being handled and managed, and I say this very respectfully, by people who hadn't actually played the game. They were administrators, they were a part of compliance and the legal aspect. Adrian Morley, our good friend, he's actually on the Tuesday night judge and jury, the Operational Rules Tribunal. So if you've done something wrong, you end up on Tuesday night stood in front of the Crown Court judge, and he's an independent Crown Court judge, the Honourable Queen's Counsellor. They are at that level. And Adrian Morley and possibly Stuart Fielden. They are ex-players of the highest standard that then will judge whether a player's guilty or he's not guilty. So I think the RFL have decided to stave off some elements of criticism about the process. We'll actually put people in there who have gone through the entire process, and I certainly have, and so has Adrian.
Well, absolutely have. Let me read you some more quotes. You're chair of the Match Review Panel now in 2022. Your Wikipedia page says Paul Cullen had an aggressive defence which made him a crowd favourite. Former referee Jim Smith said of you, I loved refereeing Paul. He could dish it out, but he never moaned or groaned when he copped one, and he could play a bit. And your former coach Tony Barrow said a player every team needs, tough and no nonsense. So how did this change come about then, from a tough, no nonsense player to a no nonsense law enforcer of the game that you are now? What is your role as chair of this disciplinary panel, which is very much this year under the spotlight.
It is. We are 4 ex-players. Paul Dixon, ex-Leeds and Bradford and half a dozen other clubs. Phil Vivas, ex-St Helens. Nathan McAvoy, ex-Salford and Bradford Bulls. And myself, ex-Warrington. 4 very different characters.
And you're chair of that lot.
And yes, I think I'm chair of it because I don't mind talking and I can deliver a message. So and the other guys are all full-time. They've all got full-time jobs. But we are an independent panel. So the process is in 3 stages. It's match officials have got the game 0 to 80. Cold light of day over the weekend, Monday morning, we review every Super League game, every contact, every incident. And then if we charge a player, the match review panel never ban a player. They grade an incident and you've got a caution to an A, B, C, D, E or an F. That's it. So if there's a high tackle or a punch or a cannonball on a knee or someone drops on the back of someone's ankle, and a lot of the stuff we look at these days is a part of the modern day wrestling techniques that some players aren't very good at wrestling and get it wrong.
Well, the rugby players, they're not wrestlers.
Quite, and neither are the boxers either. No. And under the current climate, the new science and the new information about concussion and head injuries, that the game has had to get in line, and it has done. And in fact, I think it's well in front of the curve. They take their responsibility very, very seriously, and I'm happy to be a part of that. And you're quite right, Ed. I have literally gone from one side to the other, but in it, I fully understood what we were doing in the day. I don't think there was anything careless or borderline reckless. A lot of that was intentional. It was a part of the game. It was a part of the fabric of the game. And it's unacceptable in 2022 to 2 rugby players to stand up and punch each other in the face. So what would have been dealt with a careless kind of charge, a grade A, a punching 101 minor, is now an intentional bracket. And that's one of been the big changes this year. The clubs have been informed that was going to happen. And I've seen a massive behaviour change. There's very, very few punches thrown. Whether people like that or dislike that, these ex-rugby players that we know very well are suffering seriously from concussion and knocks to the head. And that whole investigation is ongoing. It's current. It's being led by the medical geniuses and that are managing the game and taking responsibility for the game. And all they're trying to do is to reduce the avoidable, unnecessary contacts with the head.
The problem is that you've had 48 games and 42 cards, red and yellow, have been shown by the referees. Once you review the matches on a Monday morning, you then hand it on to the disciplinary process. So you are grading what the offences are. Do you think your colleagues on the panel are then getting it right?
Oh, well, for the vast majority, yes. So if there has been, I'll accept those facts. Do I think? Well, we clearly don't, because there's been a small number, 3, 4 incidents where someone's been sin-binned and then we haven't charged on a Monday morning. But we have the benefit of the cold light of day. We've got some kids
the replays
and the replays
angles, yeah.
And the angles, the slow-mo, freeze frame. A match official doesn't have that in the, and I think they've been very, very brave. I think in general they've done a fantastic job. It has been described, I've got the toughest job in rugby league, chairing the match review panel. Eddie, I haven't. I think Steve Ganson has got one of the toughest jobs in rugby league, after the players and after the coaches, because it's the players that are going through the situation. Coaching in the modern era is very different. It's changed.
Isn't it up to the coaches to change the psyche of the player?
Yes, and I think they are. I generally think they are. We're seeing less fighting. We're seeing less hits in the back after the ball's gone. You can't have players knocked unconscious when they don't have the ball and someone hits them in the back and runs off. I mean, how was that ever a tackle anyway in any era? It came in because the game has gone quite lateral. The ball goes from one wing to another on a very regular basis. It's a prescribed set play, and a block play after a block play after a block play. So the ball starts with the right winger and the left winger scores. There was examples of that in the past, but it wasn't practically every time someone gets into the good ball, the good field position. So the game has become quite lateral. So there's pressure from the markers, pressure from the inside, and people are passing a ball, relaxing and getting hit in the back and having their necks flexed. They're getting whiplash. It's a part of the modern modern day game, which has to be managed. And you have to manage things that are borderline, that would be a penalty or possibly a sin bin. They're cautions or grade A's. We can't allow that to happen, because the modern science says if you've picked up 5 or 6 minor, small hits in the back and your neck has been flexed, there's damage. That means the brain is hitting the inside of the skull. And it's not just the big collisions that are being now factored in. It's the accumulation of the smaller collisions. So getting 4 or 5 hits in the back when you haven't got the ball is now being deemed to be a serious situation, because players are leaving the field concussed because they're failing HIAs. So this is about protecting players, and if you're protecting players and they're not getting injured, you're also by default protecting players that are not getting suspended.
I don't think anyone can argue with anything that you've said. That's the process. Now the problem is, of course, that we all now know the process. We all now know what goes on Monday to Friday. It's when the referee makes a decision on the field, 2 men in the sin bin, match is gone for the team that has suffered the 2 men in the sin bin. There's a lot of former players, and we know who they are, and they're quite vocal from time to time. A lot of former players say that the whole process at the moment is wrong. What do you say to them?
Well, I think they're wrong. The whole process isn't wrong. Have the 3 elements, and that would be match officials during game time, match review panel cold light a day Monday morning, the operational rules tribunal, the judge and jury on a Tuesday night. Are we, all 3 of us, 100% perfect in every decision that we've made this season so far? No, we're not. We're human beings, and you have, inconsistencies built into the programme, because what is there, 6 or 7 full-time match officials? There's 6 or 7 full-time judges who are working on the ORT. There's about a dozen side members. The match review panel are very consistent because it's only the 4 of us, and we view every single incident every single week. So in it, there's been a small number, I think 2, 3, 4 sin bins in a game which have affected the flow of a game, or partly affected the flow of a game, and we haven't charged on a Monday morning. Well, I don't think that is although, and the match officials have been very, very honest and say we've got a couple wrong. But there's no one been sent from the field that's not been charged.
Will this last? Will this, they call it a clamp down, they call it, whatever they like to say, they're trying to freshen up, it's the wrong word, they're trying to make the game what it is. They're standing and stamping on foul play. We're 7-8 weeks into the season. When we get to the end of the season, can we look back and say this has lasted right the way through? Because at the minute it seems to have eased off, and we've seen that in the past. We've had these massive clampdowns on players in the past at the start of the season. Midway through, it's all forgotten, we're back to normal.
Well, there's many moving parts in this, and I'll be really clear. This year, for 2022, there's only been 2 changes in the laws in terms of the compliance, the modern day sentencing guidelines, and that was about punching and striking. They've gone from where you could grade something at a grade A, B or C for 2 players punching each other once or twice in the head. And that's now a minimum of a grade D. And you can clearly...
grade D carries
an option of the judge on Tuesday night awarding a 3, 4 or 5 game penalty notice or a 5-game ban. Okay. But that's the wisdom of a Crown Court judge assessing evidence and facts and listening to the defence and representation of the player, the coach, the chief executive, the director of rugby, their legal advisor. It mimics the judicial system in this country.
Are the clubs on board with this?
Absolutely. Eddie, that's been on board now for the past 10 or 15 years. It's a part of the modern game. There's nothing new in that. If anything's charged at A, B and C, deemed to be the lesser offences, an A, you can either have a 0-game penalty notice or a 1-game penalty note attached, depending. So your good character or your good form is taken into consideration, or not if you've done it before.
So it's like a court of law. If you've got past and previous, you're going to suffer.
Yes, for example, if there's 2 players and they both punch each other in the face, and it's quite clear, it's live on Sky Television, and there you see them. I punch you, you punch me. I kind of guarantee if the evidence is clear, you'll get a grade D and I'll get a grade D, and we'll both be up before the judge on Tuesday night. Eddie, you've never done it before, and I've done it 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. So the judge might give you 3 games, and he might give me 5, because my record, my character, my presentation will be taken into account by an independent Crown Court judge.
You can't argue with that.
Well, it's not the head of rugby league. It's not Ralph Rimmer or Karen Morehouse or Robert Hicks making that decision. It's not Paul Cullen or Paul Dixon or Nathan McAvoy or Phil Vivers. We've simply charged. We may have been. We've seen it this year. We've punched each other and we've been sent from the field. When we look at that in the cold light today, we'll say, right, well, I've punched you once, you've punched me once. It's clearly a grade D because that's now an intentional act. There's no A, B and C available to us. It's the easiest decision we'll ever make. The judge then will decide what the evidence looks like, how it's presented, what the attitude of the yours is in defending yourself and mine for telling them how I've done it and why I've done it and what's happened. And then he'll decide whether we're guilty or not. Some players go up and just plead guilty. By default, they're giving themselves a 3, 4 or 5 game ban because they're pleading guilty to a charge because they've clearly done it, And the vast majority of players plead guilty. And even some where I've seen, concerns from coaches, even complaints from coaches, they've actually pleaded guilty to the offence.
So, in your mind, despite what ex-players, fans, commentators, critics say, your conscience is clear. All of you.
Absolutely clear.
You're not ruining the game, as people say.
I think we are future-proofing the game, Eddie. I really do. I could use that. The analogy of King Canute. It's all right standing at the shore saying the tide's not going to come in. It's coming in. It's coming in without a shadow of a doubt. This is being led by medical evidence and the scientists that are protecting players in a sport that's getting faster, they're more powerful, they're fitter. So whether people think the game is as good in the 70s and 80s or the 90s, the early 2000s as it is now, I guarantee players are better prepared, they are bigger, they're more powerful, they're fitter. It might not be, we might not have another Martin Offiah currently, we might not have another Ellery Hanley, but they'll come,
Because they'll be encouraged to take the game up. Because it's a cleaner, faster sport.
It's far safer. Yeah. Will you get contact? Of course you will. Will you get knocked in or around the head or neck in a game of rugby league? Yes, you will. What the game is trying to move away from is the avoidable, the unnecessary contact with the head, neck and or spinal cord or any other joint that's being compromised because wrestle technique is not good enough. You can't twist someone's wrist or pull their elbow back or chicken wing the shoulder or drop on the back of someone's ankle and say it's a reasonable tackle. This is a process. We follow process. We don't simply sit there on a Monday morning and make it up. We are accountable. So in the meeting, there's the 4 members, as previously mentioned. There's also the head of the RFL's compliance team, which is Gavin Wild. He's also sat in there with Richard Yates, the head of the RFL's legal team. We answer to the game. And the rules that we currently enforce are supplied to us by the game. So 2018, 4 clubs were asked to review the entire disciplinary process. From second 0, the referee blows the whistle, to the judge on Tuesday night saying someone's guilty or not guilty and giving them a 1, 2, 3, 5 game ban or whatever he does. And that was led by 4 clubs. Hull Kingston Rovers, Neil Hudgell, Adam Pearson at Hull FC. He delegated that to Motu Tony, Michael Carter at Wakefield and Chris Hamilton from Oldham, one of the most experienced chairmen in the game, has seen everything from Super League to Division 1 to Division 2. They reviewed the entire process on behalf of the game. They made recommendations which went out to every single club, Super League, Championship, League One. They all fed back in. That was knocked about and changed and adapted. Everyone had their say, and they delivered to match officials, to match review and to the ORT the rules of engagement going forward. We are simply enforcing the rules of the game decided by the game.
And you're the man regularly put up to do this sort of thing and explain, and you've explained brilliantly on this podcast. We now know where we stand. I remember saying to you a long time ago, you've got a career in broadcasting. Where next you go? You've got primrose and blue blood running through your veins. You've already told us that. Will you ever go back to Warrington? They say never go back. You and Lee Breers could just wave a magic wand one of these days and give Warrington a championship, for God's sake.
Well, sometimes, Ed, the ship has sailed. I went through a process. It was a personal process. As we know, it started for me in 2006. And by 2010 has come around, my life changed beyond all recognition. And if you want to coach, you've got to live this life 24/7, 365. Sometimes it's like trying to manage 10 Rottweilers. You've got 5 dogs in each hand on a short lead, and you get pulled from north, south, east, and west. And if you can't manage that and control that, and if you've not got the energy or the wherewithal to do that, then you shouldn't coach, because you're going to get found out. So I thoroughly enjoyed every second of my life in rugby league, and certainly at Warrington. But I have managed to push the button. I work as an independent member of the match review panel. So Eddie will, as you know, will get criticised from all quarters. So I'm aware of it. I'll receive criticism from other clubs by saying that I'm ex-Warrington. And I get criticised in Warrington because we ban Warrington players. Michael Cooper is one of the leading players at Warrington. He's his family. He's my nephew. We've banned him twice. That was a great Sunday dinner, I can tell you. But there's no fear, no favour. And again, that kind of criticism of the four, Paul Dixon and Phil Vivers and Nathan McAvoy, between them, I think they played for every club in rugby league. There's not a club that we protect or go after or don't charge or charge. Every single incident is reviewed with the utmost honesty and integrity. And I'll challenge anyone in any aspect to charge us with that and put it against us.
Well, look, the story as we've told it today has gone back to 1980. 42 years you've been involved. I mean, it's frightening, isn't it? Absolutely frightening. But Paul, always a pleasure to see you, always a pleasure to catch up, and thank you for the insight, because a lot of people now will know where you guys are coming from. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Eddie, thank you very much. The platform, and it's probably something, when I say we, the game in general needs to do more of. Because if we think that everyone who follows our game understands this process inside out, we'd be kidding ourselves. It'd be denial. They don't. We just need to be better at it in explaining it. So this platform is absolutely priceless. And you were very kind, just in referring back to the work that we did together for Sky Sports, and we worked together in the media before Sky Sports. That's how we came to be friends.
Ring around, do you remember it?
It was, and it was like the early days of trying to take the game away from its traditional media slot and position. And I learned so much from your good self and from Stevo in terms of professionalism and presentation and looking at the game from a different aspect. I'm not the same person I was when I was that kind of full-on fifth gear player at Warrington. I changed when I became captain. I changed when I became an assistant coach. One of the greatest learning curves was working with your good self as a broadcaster. It made you look at the game in a different light. I thought I knew the way the game worked until I began working as an independent for the RFL. I began to see the game from the inside out, and I've got a completely different view on it now. It works. Can it be better? Of course it can, but there's a drive within the RFL to take this game forward. I know that doesn't come across perfectly on all occasions, but without a doubt, and player safety and future-proofing the game is a driving force in the whole of that aspect, and it's why I do it.
Well, a real privilege to spend some time with Paul Cullen. Trust you enjoyed it as much as I did, and you'll all make sure to join both Stevo and I again for the next edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast.